Was 2022 the best year for strategy gaming ever? Now that 2022 is drawing to a close, I think it's time to take a step back and look at what this year actually brought the genre. And it's not little at all. Back in February, Creative Assembly began the year strong with Total War Warhammer 3. Now this game was certainly not without its faults, but what it lacked in polish, it absolutely made up for in significance. Warhammer 3 not only saw significantly updated visuals from the last Warhammer, but introduced all new factions, a massive new world map and size, and even new types of campaign scenarios and battlefields. Like it or not, Creative Assembly really tried to innovate here, bringing a separate campaign realm entirely through the realms of chaos. And even though it wasn't perfect, I appreciate the effort. Warhammer 3 did not truly shine until later in the year though, when Immortal Empires arrived. Immortal Empires did something incredible. It draws from more than half a decade of Total War, and combines the various Warhammer campaigns and factions into one and the same. This truly is an achievement, and for the Warhammer fans, I can't think of anything more awesome than this. A globe-spanning map with every legendary lord out there, with so many different units and races, all in one and the same campaign. And even though there certainly will be more Warhammer 3 DLC down the line, Immortal Empires is the crowning achievement of this trilogy, and a fantastic free expansion to those who have been with the Warhammer series since 2016. In May, Steam players finally got to experience Old World and its first massive expansion, Heroes of the Aegean. Old World is a great take on the Civilization formula, and innovates by introducing Crusader Kings like family and intrigue mechanics. While Old World isn't as flashy as Total War, probably on account of coming from an indie developer, it's a surprisingly deep and history-focused game. And if you've been wanting a bit more realism out of that Civilization genre, then Old World just might be the game for you. The first half of the year also saw the grand return of Crusader Kings 3 in the form of two massive expansions for the game. The first came in February with Royal Court, introducing all new mechanics related to the governing of the realm, and a bunch of quality of life and interesting features, many of which made the game a lot more personal, for example by adding customization to your very own throne room. Royal Court was somehow the first major expansion to CK3 after about a year and a half after release, and of course also after Northern Lords, which can probably be attributed to difficulties related to certain working from home situations. My favorite CK3 expansion thus far, however, came in the form of Struggle for Iberia in May. This was another flavor pack similar to Northern Lords, but was for all intents and purposes much larger. Here, an entirely new region-based mechanic for Iberian factions changes the game completely, meaning you'll have to navigate various situations during the centuries-long war for the peninsula. I love how it included everything from religion to personal grievances, and even brought in new music and even language and cultural mechanics. And especially for the Iberian factions, Crusader Kings 3 is never the same again. Hearts of Iron 4 also received a large new expansion, namely By Blood Alone, which finally introduced new mechanics for Italy amongst others, and brought even more micromanagement to battalions and peace conferences. In my opinion, this DLC did exactly what it sought out to accomplish, and even though perhaps wasn't anything revolutionary, it definitely brought new life to the countries it focused on. And finally we entered the last part of the year, and arguably the most eventful part in terms of new games. First, even though it wasn't a full release, Manor Lords provided a playable demo, giving us a taste of what's to come. Despite being an early version, Manor Lords seems promising, and I can't wait to try the full game later on. September saw the release of the sci-fi strategy game Terra Invicta, which I sadly have yet to truly dig into due to certain other games. And that game in particular is perhaps the grandest event of the year for me personally, namely October's Victoria 3. Victoria 3 is arguably the largest and most ambitious Paradox game ever, and although it had a buggy and unfinished launch, the game still has the foundations for a massively awesome future. Here, in this vast Victorian era world, we get to guide our nation to greatness on the world stage. But everything begins with the small, with production chains to make the money flow, and of course with populations, politics, diplomacy, and war. Of course, figuring all of this out and becoming comfortable with the game does take a whole lot of time, which is what prompted me to make an actual 2-hour tutorial for the game. I am extremely excited to see where Victoria 3 goes in the future, and because of its amazing foundations, but with its many shortcomings in the details and practicalities, I think Victoria 3 can only become even better with time. And then, perhaps for the last major grand strategy event of the year, Knights of Wonder 2 released in December. This was a highly anticipated game, delayed several times, and when it finally released, I loved it. It definitely has a distinctly old school feel about it, but I think that's part of the charm. Knights of Honor 2 takes a different approach to historical strategy, with a particular focus on the sandbox experience. It's a simpler experience in many ways, but by combining aspects of Paradox and Total War games through deep campaign mechanics and actual real-time battles, Knights of Honor 2 was interesting at launch, but will perhaps be even more exciting in 2023, when the team actually gets to listen to community feedback and expand on what's already here. In other words, it's been quite the extraordinary year for Grand Strategy, with new mainline titles releasing from both Creative Assembly and Paradox, and with DLC and other awesome games launching as well. And many other titles I haven't really touched upon, one of those being Songs of Conquest for example. We even received the Kingdom expansions for Medieval 2 on handheld devices, which is quite the achievement for mobile strategy. In my personal opinion, however, it was a great year on paper, but perhaps not the best in terms of my own tastes. The Warhammer series is not my favorite, and for 2023, I'd love for CA to return to historical Total War in one way or another. It's just been so many years since we got something I was genuinely excited for from Total War, as their last true historical title came out all the way back in 2015. And even though it might sound a bit crazy, no Grand Strategy year is truly complete without a new historical Total War for me. And so as you might tell, it's been a long 7 years since Attila. In many ways, just like with the gaming industry as a whole, I think strategy game developers need to look inward and to realize that publishing games in playable states is in general more important than to provide feature-rich games at launch. And at launch, Warhammer 3 left a lot to be desired as pointed out by the community, not just in terms of bugs, but also in terms of weird camera angles in the realms of chaos and performance issues. The same goes for Victoria 3 of course, for while feature-rich, launched in a state which absolutely felt reminiscent of an early access game. There were just so many smaller things that should have been improved upon for launch, like UI aspects, explanations, and of course, warfare. For Knights of Honor 2, I can't believe that we still have to deal with awkward zoom levels in 2022, which just seems like should have been a thing from a bygone era, especially when getting proper overviews of either the campaign map or the battle map is so vital to any strategy experience. 2022 brought hundreds of hours of new grand strategy experiences for me, and it absolutely was a year of grand events. But what do you think? Was 2022 a disappointment, a surprise, or just a damn good time? And what do you think 2023 will bring? I myself really hope for something historical in terms of Total War, and at this point, I'm hoping for something like a Medieval 2 remaster, a Medieval 3, or an Empire 2. And I hope we see further improvements and expansions to both Victoria 3 and even Crusader Kings 3, which I think are the Paradox games in most need of something new and fresh. Let me know your thoughts down below, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.